During her time in the north, Queen Alysanne also wished to listen to the women of the north. When Lord Commander Burleigh of the Night's Watch explained that there were no women at the wall, she persisted until finally, with reluctance, he escorted her to a village south of the wall, Molestown. Burleigh told the Queen she would find women there, though most of them would be harlots. The men of the Night's Watch took no wives, he explained, but they remained men all the same. Queen Alysanne said she did not care, and so it came to pass that she held her women's court among the halls of Molestown, and there had certain towers that would change the Seven Kingdoms forever. Back in King's Landing, the Archon of Tyrosh and the Prince of Pentos, as well as Jaehaerys Targaryen, finally put their seals to a treaty of eternal peace. The fact a deal was reached at all was considered a miracle, and largely due to the king's veiled hint that Westeros might enter the war itself if a accord was not reached. Only then was King Jaehaerys free to fly north with Vermithor. He and the Queen reunited at Winterfell after half a year apart. The king's time at Winterfell began on an ominous note. On his arrival, Alaric Stark led his grace down to the crypts below the castle to show him his brother's tomb. Walton lies down here, in the darkness, in no small part thanks to you. Stars and swords, the leavings of your 7 gods, what are they to us? And yet you sent them to the wall, in their hundreds and their thousands. So many that the Night's Watch was hard pressed to feed them all. And when the worst of them rose up, the Oathbreakers you had sent to us, it cost my brother's life to put them down. A grievous price, the king agreed. That was never our intent. You have my regrets, my lord, and my gratitude. I would sooner have my brother, Lord Alaric answered darkly. Lord Stark and King Jaehaerys would never be fast friends, as the shadow of Walton Stark was between them. It was only through Queen Alysanne they ever found accord. The Queen had visited Brandon's gift, the land south of the wall, that Brandon the Builder had granted to the Watch for their support and sustenance. She told the king the lands were not enough. The soil was thin and stony, the hills unpopulated. The Watch lacks for coin, and when winter comes, they will lack for food as well. The answer she proposed was a new gift, a further strip of land south of Brandon's gift. The notion did not please Lord Alaric. Though a strong friend to the Night's Watch, he knew that the lords who presently held the lands in question would object strongly to them being given away without their leave. I have no doubt that you can persuade them, Lord Alaric, the Queen said. And charmed by her, as ever, Alaric Stark agreed that he could, and so it came to pass that the size of the gift was doubled with a stroke. After lingering in Winterfell for another fortnight, they made their way to Torrens Square, and then to Barrowtown, where Lord Dustin showed them the barrows of the first king. From there, Vermithor and Silverwing took Jaehaerys and Alysanne back to King's Landing. The men and women of their retinue had a more arduous journey home, travelling overland from Barrowtown back to White Harbour and taking a ship from there. Even before the others reached White Harbour, King Jaehaerys had called together his council in the Red Keep to consider an idea from his queen. When Sept and Bath, Grand Maester Benefit and the others had assembled, Alysanne told them of her visit to the wall and the days that she had spent with the whores and fallen women of Molestown, as well as the other dark rumours she had been told by the women of the north. There was a girl there, the Queen said, no older than I am, a pretty girl, but not, I think, as pretty as she once was. Her father was a blacksmith, and when she was a maid of 14 years, he had given her hand in marriage to his apprentice. She was fond of the boy, and he of her, so the two of them were duly wed. But scarcely had they said their vows that their lord came down upon their wedding, with his men-at-arms to claim his right to her first night. He carried her off to his tower and enjoyed her, and the next morning his men returned her to her husband. But her maidenhead was gone, together with whatever love the apprentice boy had borne her. He could not raise his hand against the lord for peril of his life, so instead he raised it against his wife. When it became plain that she was carrying the lord's child, he beat it out of her. From that day on, he never called her anything but whore, until finally the girl decided that if she must be called that, she would live as one, and made her way to Molestown. There she dwells until this day, a sad child, ruined. All the while, in other villages, other maids are being wed, and other lords are claiming their first night. Hers was the worst story, but not the only one. At White Harbour, at Molestown, Barrowtown, other women spoke of their first nights as well. I knew of the tradition. Even on Dragonstone, there are stories of men of my own house who have made free with the wives of fisherfolk and serving men and side children on them. Dragon seeds, they call them, Jaehaerys said with obvious reluctance. It is not a thing to boast of, but it has happened. Maybe perhaps more often than we care to admit. Such children are cherished though. Orys Baratheon himself was a dragon seed, a bastard brother to our grandfather, Aegon the Conqueror. Whether he was conceived of a first night, I cannot say, but Lord Aerion was his father. That was well known. Gifts were given. Gifts, the Queen said in a voice sharp with derision. I see no honour in any of this. I knew such things happened hundreds of years ago, but I never dreamed that the custom endured so strongly to this day. Maybe perhaps I did not want to know. I closed my eyes, but that poor girl in Molestown opened them. The right of the first night, your grace, my lords. It is time we put an end to this, I beg of you. Grand Maester Benefit tells us. A silence fell as the Queen finished speaking. The lords of the small council shifted awkwardly in their seats and exchanged glances until finally the King himself spoke up, sympathetically but reluctant. What the Queen proposed would be difficult, said Jaehaerys. Lords grew troublesome when kings began to take things they regarded as their own. Their lands, their gold, their rights, their wives, Alysanne finished. I remember our own wedding night, my lord. If you had been a blacksmith and me a washerwoman, and some lord had come to claim me and take my maidenhead that day we took our vows, what would you have done? Killed him, Jaehaerys said. But I am not a blacksmith. If, I said, the Queen persisted. A blacksmith is still a man, is he not? What man but a coward would stand by meekly whilst another man had his way with his wife? We do not want blacksmiths killing lords, surely. She turned to Grand Maester Benefit and said, how many more such instances have there been, I wonder? The first night is an offence against the king's peace, the Queen concluded. An offence against not only the maid, but her husband as well, and the wife of the lord. Never forget, what do those highborn ladies do while their lords are out deflowering maidens? Do they sew, sing, pray? Were it me, I might pray my lord husband fell off his horse and broke his neck coming home. King Jaehaerys smiled at that, but it was plain that he was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. The right of the first night is an ancient one, he argued, though with no great passion, as much as a part of lordship as the right of pit and gallows. It was rarely used south of the neck, but its continued existence is the right of a lord would be loath to surrender. You are not wrong, my love, but sometimes it is best to let sleeping dragons lie. We are the sleeping dragon, the Queen threw back. These lords who love the first night are dogs. Why must they slake their lusts on maidens who have only just pledged their love to other men? Have they no wives of their own? Are there no whores in their domain? The JordiGart, Lord Amber Massey, spoke up next, saying, there is more to the first night than lust, your grace. The practice is an ancient one, older than the Andals, older than the faith. It goes back to the Dawn Age. The first men were savage race, and like the wildlings beyond the wall, they followed only strength. Their lords, their kings were warriors, mighty men and heroes, and they wanted their sons to be the same. If a warlord chose to bestow his seed upon a maid on her wedding night, it was seen as a sort of blessing, and if a child should come of the coupling, so much the better. The husband could then claim the honour of raising a hero's son as his own. Maybe that was so 10,000 years ago, the Queen replied, but the lords claiming the first right now are no heroes. You have not heard the women speak of them. I have. Old men, fat men, cruel men, poxy boys, droolers, men covered with scabs and with scars, with boils, lords who have not washed in half a year, men with greasy hair and lice. These are your mighty men. I listened to the girls, and none of them felt blessed. The Andals never practiced the first night in Landalos, Grand Maester Benefit added. When they came to Westeros and swept away the kingdoms of the first men, they found the tradition in place and chose to let it be. Septon Bath spoke, turning to the king. Sire, if I may be so bold, I believe her grace has the right of it. The first men might have found some purpose for this right, but the first men fought with bronze swords and fed their weirwood trees with blood. We are not those men, and it is past time we put an end to this evil. It stands against every ideal of chivalry. Our knights swear to protect the innocent of maidens, save for when the lords they serve wish to despoil one. We swear our marriage vows before the father and the mother, promising fidelity until the stranger comes to part us. And nowhere in the seven-pointed star does it say those promises do not apply to lords. You are not wrong, your grace. Some lords will surely grumble at this, especially in the north, but all the maids will thank us for it, and all the husbands and fathers and the mothers, just as the Queen has said. I know the faithful will be pleased. His High Holiness will let his voice be heard, never doubt it. When Bath had finished speaking, Jaehaerys Targaryen threw up his hands. I know when I am beaten. Very well, let it be done. And so it came to pass that the second of what the small folk named Queen Alysanne's laws was enacted, the ending of the lord's ancient right to the first night. Henceforth it was decreed a bride's maidenhead would belong only to her husband, whether joined before a septon or a heart tree, and any man, be it a lord or a peasant, took her on her wedding night or any other night would be guilty of the crime of rape.